Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good day and welcome to IIFL Wealth and Asset Management Q3 FY21 earnings conference call. All participant lines will be on listen-only mode, and there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions after the management shares their initial thoughts. Should you need assistance during the conference call, please signal the host by clicking on the raise hand icon. Please note that this conference is being recorded. Today on the call we have with us on behalf of IIFL Wealth and Asset Management, Mr. Karan Bhagat, Managing Director and CEO, Mr. Anshuman Maheshwari, Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Mihir Nanavati, the Chief Financial Officer, and Mr. Pawan Mangnani, Head Strategy and Investor Relations. Over the next hour, Mihir will take us through the financial performance for the quarter. Anshuman will provide us the other key highlights, and then we'll have Karan share his thoughts on the macro trends in the market and our business. We will then open it for Q&A. I now hand over to Mihir. Over to you, Mihir.
Thank you, Anil, and warm welcome to all the participants on this earnings conference call. I will now give a brief overview of the financial performance of the company for the quarter ended December 31, 2020. And as I begin, I would like to mention that we continue to function effectively and across the platforms through these times, and have seen steady growth and stable operating metrics for the quarter. First, asset under management. Our overall AUM increased 7.2% Q on Q to rupees 2,494 crores from 1,87,097 crores in Q2. Of this, our ARR assets increased 14.4% Q on Q to rupees 90,500 crores from rupees 79,142 crores in Q2. IIFL 1 AUM grew 16.6% quarter on quarter to rupees 25,948 crores from rupees 22,259 crores in Q2. Our loan book increased 6.5% quarter on quarter to rupees 3,019 crores from 2,836 crores in Q2. On the revenue side, our total revenues for this quarter increased 13.4% quarter on quarter to rupees 280 crores from rupees 247 crores in Q2. Within this, our ARR revenue for this quarter showed an increase of rupees 10.1% quarter on quarter, up from rupees 140 crores in Q2 to rupees 154 crores. Other income for the quarter stood at rupees 41 crores. On a 9-month basis, we reported an overall revenue of rupees 766 crores, up 13.6% year on year from rupees 675 crores in the earlier period. On to expenses. Our total expenses for the quarter increased 13.4% quarter on quarter to rupees 152 crores from 134 crores. Of this, total employee cost increased by 10.6% quarter on quarter to rupees 109 crores from rupees 99 crores. Accordingly, our overall cost to income ratio remained flat at 54% for the quarter. On a 9-month basis, the aggregate expenses were 416 crores, up 3.5% year on year basis from rupees 402 crore in the previous period. Profitability. Operating profit before tax for the quarter was rupees 87 crore, which increased by 11.8% quarter on quarter from 78 crores. PBT for the quarter increased by 13.4% to rupees 128 crores, and PAT accordingly increased to rupees 97 crores from 86 crores in previous quarter. On a 9-month basis, our PBT stood at 350 crores, up 29% year on year compared to 272 crores, and PAT stood at 267 crores, up 29% year on year up from 206 crores in the previous period. With this, I will now hand over to Anshuman to take us through other key business highlights. Thank you.
Thanks, Mihir. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me move on to the key highlights for the quarter. Overall, as Mihir shared the numbers, we have continued on a sustained growth and financial performance trajectory for Q3. We see strong overall momentum across both our wealth and asset management businesses and remain focused on clients, employees, cost, capital. From a client sentiment perspective, we saw risk appetite returning strongly with every new high created by the benchmark indices. Flows towards equities continue to improve with our overall debt equity mix returning to almost pre-COVID levels. Overall allocations remain balanced with continued interest in fixed income instruments as well as alternate investment opportunity. New client acquisitions continue to be robust with 1,790 new relevant families onboarded over the last 9 months and 368 relevant families onboarded in the current or in the last quarter itself. Overall net flows for 9 months are at about 8,000 crores, marginally lower than where we would have liked to be. However, we are seeing strong build-up in quarter 4 and expect to end the year in line with our full year net flows target of 11 to 12,000 crores. Importantly, our flagship offering IIFL One continues to grow and gain market acceptance. Significant growth over the last quarter as well as year on year, and the assets have now reached 26,000 crores. Even within IIFL One specifically, our discretionary PMS offering saw nearly 3,000 crores of new flows. And while the retentions were lower in this quarter, we expect it to get back to over 50 bips shortly. We are very enthused by the growth being in the asset management business with net flows for the quarter at over 2,500 crores. Overall AUM increase of over 20% over last quarter and improved retentions as well. This has been driven by the strong performance of our funds, specifically on the listed equity side, as well as increased traction on institutional mandates for our alternate investment strategies. There's been negative net flows that has been seen in our TBR AUM under our distribution platform. This is again, as many of you would recall, this is as per the expectation of a gradual shift of TBR assets to ARR earning assets across the other platforms. For us, cost and capital efficiency continues to be a big focus area. On both, if I call out what we are doing and what's been seen in the last quarter, while cost to income ratio is flat, we have seen additional costs under 2 heads in the last quarter. Firstly, on employee variable costs, which is reflective of our approach towards the move to ARR, IIFL One, and incentivizing specific strategies. And secondly, on administrative costs, where we are using external support to supplement the organizational capabilities in specific areas, specifically around technology, risk, etc. I think technology is important to call out. It will continue to be a big focus area for us with a significant push on bringing digital to each part of our client journey as well as the internal organization. We are very excited by the path being taken up on this front, and we'll update you on an ongoing basis on the developments. In line with our focus on improving our capital allocation and ROE, as well as guidance on declaring 60 to 80% of our annual PAT as dividend, we are happy to declare an interim dividend of rupees 30 per share. The record date for the same is February 12, 2021. On a separate note, as we have done each quarter, we continue to enhance our reporting structure and the level of details provided in our investor presentation. As you would have seen, we've made changes to the way we've depicted AUM as well as net flows. The reduction in total AUM because of double count of assets distributed by the wealth business for the AMC has been removed. It is a signal that also highlights that we see these two as two separate businesses, two pillars to our overall wealth and asset management business working at arm's length, and the reporting on assets and retentions have been changed to reflect the same. Correspondingly, we have also started reporting our net flows by engagement type, thus providing far greater clarity in where exactly we are adding new assets and the corresponding retentions as well. And of course, we continue to review our guidance each quarter and report on our performance against the same. With that, I would now like to hand it over to Karan to share his views on the market, sentiments therein, business outlook, and lead on to the Q&A. Over to you, Karan.
Thank you, Anshuman. Good afternoon, everybody. Last quarter obviously saw a lot of confidence come back in the markets, and more specifically with high net worth individuals. There's a greater degree of confidence both on the credit side, fixed income side, and most importantly on the equity side. We've also seen the continuation of many more monetizations, not only through IPOs, but on the secondary side, there are a large number of deals which have happened over the last 3 months. A large number of them are still to be consummated, they're signed, and continuous net flows over the next 6 to 12 months, I think will continue to be a good harbinger for our business. As we grow our business, we continue to work very hard on 2 aspects. One is really the technology backend, because we need to kind of clearly segregate our business into 4 distinct parts as required by the regulator. And before 31st March, we really need to be able to segregate all our clients into advisory, non-discretionary, distribution, as well as portfolio management. So it's a fairly large exercise which the firm has undertaken, and we are fairly confident before 31st March we'll be able to engage with each client in each segment type. But overall, it'll be a net positive because we would have discussed the engagement type with every client, and most importantly, understood and debated with him which fee structure or which engagement model he wants to get into. We are hoping at least for 60 to 70% of our large clients, we have clarity by the end of the financial year. And as we go forward from there, we kind of will kind of manage to get clarity on the remaining 25 to 30%. On the competitive landscape perspective, we continue to be in a fairly good position. We feel very happy about our platform, our ability to cover all aspects of the client's requirement, and most importantly, both from a commercial perspective as well as from a extremely high engagement and a high kind of involvement. Our relationship managers, our advisory team, as well as our product team continues to be engaged with the client on a 24/7 basis. Enthusiasm and effort is not lacking at all with the team, which is very important in our business because we need to stay connected with the client at all points in time. From an overall business perspective, as Anshuman pointed out, I think one of the numbers we would have liked to be better over the last 9 odd months, and would have been our net flow number. We would have ideally pre-COVID wanted to have a number around the 12 to 15,000 crore number, potentially towards the 15,000 crore number as compared to the 12,000. I think over the last 3 months and potentially over the next 3 months, the market has given us an opportunity, as well as the number of new clients, thanks to the monetization opportunity, has given us an opportunity to cover that deficit and cover it well. We are fairly confident our net flow number of 8,500 crores for the first 9 months has definitely got the potential and the legs to move towards the 12,000 number, if not closer to the 15,000 crore number towards the end of March. Overall product performances also across the board, both on the wealth management side and asset management side, has been fairly good. It's been fairly tight. We've also been fairly innovative and opportunistic for our clients. We've done large trades in a couple of instruments which have really worked out fairly well. So while we've been kind of going deep with clients on the portfolio allocation, asset allocation, and building a process-driven approach to managing money in the longer term, we've also ended up doing 2 or 3 trades where there's a high conviction on an opportunistic basis. From an organization structure perspective, we continue to expand and ensure that we have the right bandwidth to build out all our businesses. On the wealth management side, Anirudh and Yatin both will kind of get promoted to become joint CEOs of the business. On the asset management side, Manoj, who joined us from L&T and comes with over 2 decades of experience on wealth management side, will take over as the CEO on the asset management side. And along with him, Anup, who's been the pillar of our growth and specifically performance on the asset management side, will continue to play an extremely vital role as the CIO. Umang Papneja on the wealth management side obviously continues to play a pivotal role, both on the product innovation as well as the CIO for our wealth management business. We've also seen Pramod Kumar, who joined us from Wealth Advisors and was the CEO of Wealth Advisors, take on the additional mantle of being the CIO for our IFL1 business. And he's kind of built out the entire platform over the last 12 months. And along with him, we've seen great amount of success being built in the platform over the last 12 odd months. Along with that, obviously on the non-sales and the non-investment side, we continue to make our team robust. We need to make more investments on the technology side and the risk side of the business. We continue to focus on those two aspects in a fairly deep way. And if at all there would be any increase in admin costs, it will largely be driven by these two heads. And as we build our businesses and become larger, we would want to invest more and more on the technology side. Our initial investment on the technology side will not be as much as on the client-facing side. Rather, it will be first driven towards ensuring that all our processes and interface with client can kind of be in a fairly digital way, allowing us to expand without kind of loading on a huge amount of administration expenses as we expand. Overall, things look substantially better. And if I was to say, the clarity in the business model is kind of emerging on a daily basis. Though we would like to give ourselves a little bit of pat on the back in terms of looking at the evolution of this business model over the last year and a half, 2 years, and potentially preparing for it early. You still can't prepare for it enough. And we still need a little bit more work to be done. And but we're fairly confident, like we had guided a year and a half back, by the end of Q4 of the current financial year, we would be close to, on a run rate basis, close to kind of revenue and a PAT number equal to pretty much the number we kind of restarted our restructuring of our business model towards the end of 2018. So that's really it from my side. Would love to open the floor to question and answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Karan. We'll now open the floor for Q&A. May I request you to please click on the raise hand icon to pose your questions. I also request you to kindly introduce yourself and the company you represent so that the management can address the questions appropriately. We'll just give a minute or so for the question line to queue up. First question is from the line of Saptarshi. Please unmute yourself and introduce yourself. Saptarshi, go ahead. Yes.
Thank you for the opportunity. So my first question is, like you were saying, this quarter the sentiment has been positive, and as well as you are saying a new number of deals coming in. But if we see our projections from last quarter to this quarter also, it's kind of an 11% growth in AUM that we are projecting for year-on-year, FY22 over FY21. So we are holding. So are we being conservative over here to have around 10-11% AUM growth, or you think that the growth can be much higher than this with this positive?
I think the AUM itself has to be broken up into two parts. One will be the mark to market, and second is the net flows number. So I think what we really are kind of focused on ensuring is a 12 to 15,000 crore net flow number every year. The mark to market obviously can lead to the AUM growing substantially faster, like what's happened over the last 9 months. But it can also kind of have a tough year at some point in time. So really what we are saying is a growth of 7 to 8%, which is the 15,000 crore number, purely on a net flow basis, and adding to that the mark to market.
Understood. And secondly, if we see the cost structure, so I think from last quarter to this quarter, most of the addition of AUM has been on the mark to market side rather than net flows. Net flows has been slightly subdued, even if we exclude custody assets. But on the other hand, if we see cost structure for FY21 itself, there has been high increase, I think 20% increase from earlier projections for FY21. And also if we see variable cost, I think variable cost to fixed cost is somewhat around 36% versus what we are guiding earlier, I think around 20%. So if we can talk slightly on what is happening on the variable side and overall cost structure.
No, so I think from a AUM perspective, I've kind of already answered. From a cost perspective, there are two elements of cost really. One is the employee cost and the other is the administration cost. The admin cost is seen more a one-time kind of increase on account of a few, as Anshuman pointed out, a few additional incentives on additional initiatives on the technology side. I think that's going to remain more or less in that range of close to around about 40 odd crores thereabouts for a quarter. The employee costs can become a little variable in some quarters where we kind of provide additional incentives and so on and so forth. But you need to look at the variable employee cost in two portions. One is really the employee stock options, which we've discussed earlier, and second is the bonus provision, which happens on a year-to-year basis. So I think overall put together, that number will look like 35-36% this year. But as we've discussed earlier, a component of that really is the front loading of the ESOPs, which were given last year, and a large part of that cost, nearly 55%, essentially hits in this year. From an incentive plan perspective, obviously, if as and when revenues increase a bit, there is a little bit of delta increase in the incentives. So that will obviously not be in the same proportion as revenue. But it will see a little bit of increase in incentives as far as the variables go in case of addition of AUM.
Yes, so excluding the ESOPs, are we still holding kind of a 20% of variable on our fixed employee cost as in general for normal years?
Yes, 20. So it'll broadly be in the region of 18 to 22%. Yeah.
Understood. And lastly, I think we have discussed this earlier also on the yield side. If I see across your segmental yields have either retained or improved quarter on quarter, and we have talked about that IFL1 yields to be improved again, going back to 50 bps level. But going forward, we are saying that 53 from 55 basis point this year, maybe 53 basis point next year, yield is going to be stabilized. Now, one is, do you think that yields to be stabilized 53 at this one, or second is, in which segments actually you are seeing the pressure on yield so that you are projecting slightly lower yield next year?
No, I think as such, to be honest, I don't think so. There is a massive pressure on any segment, so as to say. But I think the reason why we are projecting a 2 basis points lower yield for next year is, we're kind of assuming a slightly more benign capital market activity, and therefore the TBR revenue might end up becoming slightly softer compared to what it is this year. As far as the IFL1 AUM and the AMC AUM goes, honestly, I think we are finding clients fairly comfortable with the current yields. So we don't see too much of compression there. I think that will kind of stabilize at the current levels. There, the only functionality will be the size of the client. If you end up getting only very large clients, then obviously there will be pressure on the yield. But as long as the spread of clients between 25 crores to 500 crores, say, is good, I think that yield is more or less the right yield. But from a next year perspective, we've kind of factored in a slightly softer capital markets to kind of look at the compression in yield by 2 basis points.
So if my understanding is that
Thank you.
Just one clarification. If your understanding is correct,
Sure.
You are saying transactional yield to be, or transactional revenue to be lower for next year, and therefore lower yield. But ARR yields to be more or less in the similar region.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
There's one quick addition.
Thank you.
We've also factored a lower other income next year. This year, the other income is slightly higher because of some amount of clawback of what hit we took in Q4 of last year. That's why also you're seeing a dip.
Sure, thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Pawan. Yeah, thank you, Saptarshi, for your question. May I remind you to ask your questions, kindly click on the raise hand icon for posing your questions. Next in the line, we have Mr. Mohit Mangal. Mohit, please introduce yourself and the organization.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the opportunity. This is Mohit Mangal from Anand Rathi. So my first question is towards the investment book. So I think investment book, there are certain investments that matured, which led to the reduction in the investment book, from 6,000 odd crores to 3,300 crores. So just wanted to know what is in the pipeline for the growth, or how would we factor in?
No, so as we had pointed out in the last quarterly call, the GSEC hedge product, the structure we had issued to our clients was coming to an end in the end of March. So that's essentially the book which has got reduced from 6,000 crores to around about 3,300 crores. So that trade has kind of got automatically wound down. I think on the investment side, we have another trades on some high quality bank bonds which we've done, which is around about another 700 crores, which comes in for automatic maturity somewhere during the end of this calendar year to March of next year. So that will also reduce the investment book automatically by around about 700 odd crores. We've got 800, 900 crores broadly invested in our own products, of which around about 450, 500 is the long-term book, 350, 400 crores is the transitionary book. And the rest of it really on the investment side is broadly in liquid instruments and so on and so forth, which kind of go through a constant change. So in a sense, the long-term static book is the 700 crores, 750 crores left of the hedged product, which has no impact on our profit and loss account as such. And we have around about 850, 900 crores of different sets of instruments, which are invested back into our own instruments, own AIFs and own mutual funds.
Yeah. Okay. Got your point.
But a lot of that would be fixed income. A large part of that would be fixed income.
Okay. All right. Got your point. Now, in terms of the relevant families, okay. Now, although the relevant families increased, from the previous quarter, but if you look at the existing relevant families, that declined by around 200. So, any specific reason for that? So that decreased from 5,141 to 4,950. Hello.
Yeah, 1 second. Pawan, do you want?
So the logic of relevant families, Mohit, is families with an AUM of greater than 1 crore. If I'm just going to the PPT, go to the slide. Yeah. So relevant families on a 9-month basis have increased from 4642 to 4960. I think your question being quarter 2 to quarter 3.
Yeah.
The relevant family number may have reduced, right?
The existing relevant families.
Existing relevant families have reduced, right?
Yeah.
So that can be for 2 reasons. One, that there could be some number of families where you would have seen some amount of withdrawals which take the AUM below the crore number, and we've seen a bit of that happen in this quarter, primarily because we've seen a lot of people withdraw money for real estate purchases, but that doesn't mean that the client is lost. It simply means that AUM has dropped or it has been withdrawn and it will come back.
Okay.
Overall, on a 9-month basis, we are seeing that number increase. Quarter on quarter, because of various reasons, you may see some fluctuation in that number, but that is not a loss of families, that's simply a change.
Okay. Yeah, my last question is towards the merchant banking thing. So I think our company received the SEBI license for merchant banking. So going forward, what is the path of that for the company?
No, so I think 2 objectives there, honestly.
Yeah.
One, we obviously want some bit of revenue and SEBI registered business activities in the holding company. Because with the movement of the brokerage license into the distribution subsidiary, we would not be left with an appropriate license at the holding company. Secondly, obviously on the merchant banking side, while we have no plans to get into the conventional institutional equities and investment banking kind of business on the equity side, we've done 3 or 4 fairly large and very interesting deals on the debt syndication side. And that's something which we'll continue to explore from a merchant banking perspective. And that's really the current thought process around that license.
Fine. Yeah, that's it from my side. In case of anything, I'll join the queue.
Yeah. Thank you, Mohit. May I remind you to ask your questions, kindly click on the raise hand icon and we will facilitate your question. Next in live, we have Mr. Prashant Sridhar. Prashant, please introduce your firm and ask your question.
Prashant from SBI. Just a small clarification. On this slide number 8, which I'm looking at. So with you exiting the advisory business, I understand it's going to be a small portion of the AUM. Which portion would this form in this slide number 8?
No, Prashant, just to correct you, we've not exited at the advisory business at all. We had in fact issued a clarification on the exchanges also.
Right. It would only be where there's some linkage to the brokerage, right? Yeah.
No. I'll just explain once again.
Okay.
So essentially, earlier, some distribution clients were essentially using the direct plan to invest in mutual funds and get a feed. So they were deemed to be advisory clients without actually being advisory clients. Post the announcement of the RIA regulations, we had sent out a mail to those specific set of distribution clients that for those clients, we will not be continuing with advisory services. It was misunderstood by somebody and obviously kind of circulated as if IIFL Wealth was giving up its advisory license. We issued a clarification the next day. There is nothing like that. What we are doing is every client who comes into the system will be either split into distribution or advisory or non-discretionary PMS or discretionary PMS. So effectively, our preferred mode of dealing with ultra high net worth individuals will be non-discretionary PMS because we can have the bank and the custodian DMAT open for him. Operationally, it makes our life much easier. In case the client doesn't prefer to do that, we are absolutely open to doing advisory. As we speak currently, our advisory license is having more corporate treasury clients as opposed to high net worth clients. Most of our high net worth clients are opting for non-discretionary PMS in case they want advisory solutions or discretionary PMS. In case a client wants pure advisory, we are absolutely open to doing it. Currently, we are seeing more corporate treasuries who cannot open custodian bank accounts and DMAT accounts, open advisory accounts with us.
Okay. No, thanks. That was a very useful clarification. So these particular set of distribution clients who would move out would be what percentage of the AUM?
So totally under advisory, we had close to around about 31,000 crores of AUM, approximately 6 months back. Currently, of the 31,000 crores is broken up into 2 or 3 parts. The first part essentially is the direct AUM applications for our portfolio management clients. So that doesn't need to move out. That needs to just change from the RIA to the PMS direct plan. That's already underway. So the reporting of that 8,000 crores automatically just shifts from the RIA to PMS. The remaining 20 to 23,000 crores will have to be either mapped as a broker or mapped as an RIA. And we have time till 31st of March, which I pointed out in my introductory comments, to engage with these clients and essentially figure out whether these clients want to be continuing with us as broker clients or shift to non-discretionary PMS stroke advisory.
Understood. Thank you so much. That's really useful.
Thanks, Prashant. Next on line, we have Nihar Shah. Nihar, please introduce your firm and ask your question.
Hi, hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
Please introduce your firm and go ahead.
Sure. Hi, this is Nihar here from Newmark Capital. Just a couple of things. Firstly, on the investment piece, the profits or the other income that you get on investments is largely coming from this 850 to 900 crore investments in AIF, right? Is that correct? Or are there any other places as well where you get in this other income?
No, so the other income is essentially made up, as you're rightly saying, of 3 parts. One is the mark to market on this 850, 900 crores. Second is obviously a little part of investments in fixed deposits and so on and so forth for our exchange margins and so on and so forth. And thirdly, we have a little bit of a negative liquidity cushion running for the last 9 odd months. which is offsetting the mark to market on the AIFs. So on an average, we've been sitting on around about 5 to 600 crores surplus liquidity for the last 9 months. We started out with 1,000, it's down to around about 450, 500 now, which will get fully corrected in March, April, as we have redemptions of the NCDs coming up. So half of it is obviously addressed by the increase in a slight increase in our loan book, and half of it will get repaid in March, April. So essentially, the other income is made up of these three parts. The third part being negative right now, which is the incremental liquidity bucket.
Got it. Great. The other question I had was, if you can, on the lending book, we've seen a slight uptick on a Q-on-Q basis after, sort of being run down quite a bit over the last maybe 3 or 4, 5 quarters. Any sort of qualitative, how is that growth looking? And, where do we see that book over the next maybe year or so? That would be useful.
So 2 points there. I think generally speaking, there is an uptick on the lending side. I think ability to get hold of good transactions and potentially increase the book by around about 10 to 15% over the next quarter, that ability exists. I think we are able to see some good transactions which fit into our credit matrix, and most importantly, our transactions which give us an operating leverage on the wealth management or asset management side. So we need to tick both the boxes from a credit perspective as well as from a strategic fit into our 2 core businesses. And I think there is after some 2 or 3 quarters, the ability to kind of pick up the book by around about 10 to 15% over the coming 3 odd months. The second part of the lending book, which will give it some bit of fillip, is our declining cost of funds itself, okay? Because a large part of our borrowing was effectively, we had not depended on CPs, which paid off well right from the crisis days of ILFS all the way to COVID. But we also ended up with slightly higher cost borrowing for a longer period of time. So over the last 9 to 10 months, we've ended up having borrowed NCDs 2 years back at around about 8.75 to 8.8, which effectively has hurt us in 2 ways. One, obviously, our blended cost of our book is slightly higher on the cost side. And second, over the last 6 to 9 months, we've had a little bit of incremental liquidity. As the liability book is kind of going through a change, our incremental new borrowing is at substantially lower rates, closer to the 7 quarter kind of range. So as we hit March, April, our blended cost of funds also comes down and effectively gives us or makes us more competitive from a lending perspective to be closer to the market in terms of lending rates. I think both these factors put together will allow the loan book to kind of potentially move up by 15 to 20% from where it is today.
On a sort of structural or a fundamental perspective, Karan, do you think that, as you had mentioned earlier, that this should sort of range somewhere between 2 to 6%, depending on market cycle, and sort of average out at 4% of your AUA? Do you still hold that? Because at this point, we are at probably closer to 1.5 or thereabouts.
So 2.5 to 4% is what I think it would be. 6% would be a bit of a. I think it will should average out to around about 3 odd percent there.
3 odd percent. Great, got it. And just maybe one small.
But sorry, in that 3%, I'll also include the sponsor kind of investments broadly. So 500 crores would be kind of coming from the investment side.
Got it. And just one sort of small feedback on the presentation, if you could include a couple of data points that you used to historically, which was the attrition at both the customer side as well as the employee side, or, sort of on the relationship manager side, that sort of just, gives us a little flavor of what's happening internally in the organization.
We'll do that. We thought we'll do it more on a 6 monthly basis, but we'll get it back on a quarterly basis. No problem.
That's right. Great. Thank you. That's all from my side. Thanks.
Thank you. May I request you, in case you have any questions, please click on the raise hand icon and we'll answer your question. May I remind you once more, in case there are any other further questions, you could click on the raise hand icon and we'll answer your question. I think, Karan, you've covered most of the points well. So in case you wish to give your closing remarks, we could go ahead with that.
Thank you, everybody, and look forward to meeting you all at the end of the next quarter. What we will do is, based on the feedback, we'll add another couple of slides and potentially kind of re-upload the presentation to cover some of the aspects which have been required in the analyst call. Thank you.
On behalf of IIFL Wealth and Asset Management, we thank all of you for joining in this analyst call. Thank you and have a nice day.